We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Today, I am going to be talking to someone who has lived in multiple different countries. And I think most of us are aware that Americans just really have more space than other folks, especially if you're talking about suburban America versus big cities. It just is a completely different lifestyle. And so getting her experience and input about what it's been like to live in other countries and big cities is a really valuable lesson in what it's like to live with less. And this person is really important to me because she is actually my old roommate back when we lived in New York City, another big city together. And I mean roommate, like we shared a room. We'll share a little bit more about that as we move through the episode. But let me tell you a little bit about Britt Meyer. Britt is a busy mom of 3. She lives in London, so she goes by mom now instead of mom, which is like the cutest. Britt is a busy mom of 3 beautiful daughters and celebrates being married to her college sweetheart for 10 years this year. She has worked in the entertainment industry from off-Broadway productions to performing in various roles at Hong Kong Disneyland. Britt loves all things people and understanding cultures, having lived the last 10 years in NYC, Hong Kong, and now London. She is a serial extrovert, an Enneagram 7, and usually chats her way through the grocery store. Her lifelong calling and current profession is in building community, where she currently serves as the children and families minister at a local Anglican church. She and her family love hosting, and her greatest dream is to have her kitchen table filled with family, friends from her international community. Her proudest achievements to date might just be obtaining a British driving license. Oh my gosh, Brittany actually drove the U-Haul when we moved to New York City. So she drove this giant U-Haul through New York City at the age of 23. So frankly, she's always been a skilled driver. But I love that that is a big achievement. Yeah, driving on the other side of the road is a whole new ballgame. So proudest achievements, getting that British driver's license and speaking fluent German. You can follow along with her passion projects on Instagram at Messy. And there's an underscore in between each letter and at the end. So that's at M_E_S_S_Y_. And that's about her spiritual life. At You Better Sing Mama. That's another handle that she has, all about moms who sing to their kids. It's really cute and special. And that's You Betta, BETTA, Sing Mama, MAMA. As well as one more, it's Nylon Kong at NYLONKONG. And those are all her favorite city things. So she's just a joy and a talent in so many different ways. So let's dive into my conversation with Britt Meyer. So we are on today with my dear friend, Brittany, and I kind of given everyone a high level vision of who you are, but I would love for you to tell everyone who you are, where you live, and, a little more about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Britt Meyer, and I guess I always start by saying I'm American because I haven't lived in the States for so long. But I've got 3 children, 3 beautiful girls. I'm married to a German. We live in London. We've been here for 5 years. Before that, we were in Hong Kong for 4.5 years. Before that, I was in New York with Shannon during the same seasons, and we lived together in that season as well. And I stayed at home for the last 5 years, and I've recently started back at work for like 30 hours a week, part-time, full-time in ministry with kids and families at a new church in the area. So we live in Balham at Southwest London, and it's a juggle. Working mom.
Oh my gosh. Wait, Britt. So I knew you had just started working again. Did not know it was 30 hours a week. Holy moly, with 3 little ones.
Yeah. I have a lot of 3s in my life, I think. But it's definitely a juggle. And just the school rush in the morning is like, I'm still working through that because in the UK, they start at 4 with reception, which is like kindergarten equivalent. And then every 3-year-old gets how many hours, 15 hours a week of childcare. So my middle one goes for like 2.5 days, and then we top. So she's going 3.5 days a week. And then my youngest does a childminder, which is like a nanny week. They call it a childminder, so the words are different. He goes 2 days a week. And then I like have them with me at work sometimes, and because it's ministry and it's friendly with kids. So it's just a huge juggle, but it was really a blessing. It was just the right time and the right opportunity, and I just really missed working. But I'm definitely seeing now, after staying home, how hard it is on both sides.
On both sides. Oh, I feel that so much because I've done full-time working mom. I've done just fully stay at home. And now I'm in a hybrid as well, working part-time. And it's crazy. And you know what? Actually, though, what you just said, I loved it because any parents listening will be like, oh man, I get it. When your kids are on different schedules and then you have an awkward like period of time before you have to pick up another one. And it's just all a mess. And frankly, is why I think you and I both have simplified our lives in other ways because kids just inherently make it complicated. So I love that. It's like the perfect intro. But also, you glossed over some really epic things about all the places you've lived. Okay, so let's backtrack just a little bit. Where are you from originally?
Sure. Yes, I'm a fellow Virginia girl like you, Shannon. I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. My whole life lived in the same house. And then went to James Madison University and got a bachelor's of music and music theater, and then pretty much moved to New York City straight away because a very dear friend asked me if we didn't win the Miss Virginia pageant, would I move to New York with them? And then we drove a U-Haul across the East Coast.
Spoiler, the friend was me. It was me. We competed in Miss Virginia together for the Miss America organization. And Brittany and I both had a background in musical theater and dreams to live in New York and pursue Broadway. And so we moved up there together because neither of us won Miss Virginia. We both got close though. Hey. And so we got to live together in New York. So wait, let's talk about that for just a moment. My memory is the worst, but okay. So first we shared a bedroom twice. Well, actually that's all we did. We shared a bedroom first in Brooklyn and then in Washington Heights. And both of us came from very, I guess, plentiful homes growing up. We both lived in relatively bigger homes. And so we had to downsize our lives into essentially a dorm room, but as adults, I would say. So we each had, I'm thinking, let's think about our Washington Heights apartment where we had more than just a room to ourselves. We actually had a living room, a kitchen, and one bedroom that we shared, and 2 little closets before we got bed bugs. God bless it. And oh my gosh, do you remember?
Moment brings it. Oh.
Okay, so I feel like that was a really cool experiment for me to figure out living with less, was in New York City. And then you started your whole life up there. I mean, you got married, you and your husband lived in New York. So tell me a little bit about how did that kick off, starting your adult life in such small spaces? Do you think that kicked anything off in terms of your love for simplicity?
Gosh. Yeah, I don't know that it did per se, because it is also like the capital of the world and things are thrust at you constantly to want to buy and consume. But I guess too, also a big factor in New York or any of these big cities is just the cost. And I very quickly realized I wanted experiences over things. And it was, you were like the same, going to shows, going to dinners, like not eating so that you could afford to go out to eat or go get drinks after work, and living on less income wise, and paying so much for rent, which we still are. I think that just already reorients your finances. And then the spatial bit, I think, was just, that's how it is. Like, it's not like in movies where, oh wow, look, they have this huge gigantic, I mean, it's always so unrealistic, as we know, when you're really in a pillbox. And so I guess
Sex in the City isn't real, people.
Yeah, no, not at all. You're like, this can't be right. So I guess, that was more thrust upon me, and I didn't mind it because the city then becomes your playground. The city is where you live, and where you just retreat to home to really eat and sleep and hang out, but you're really out more than you are in. So it was not conscious probably until Hong Kong season for me, because Hong Kong was even smaller and even more condensed. because you've got these high rises only on the it's literally a concrete jungle because the living space is only on the edges. It's right on a coast, and then it's immediately jungle up the mountains, so it's even less space. I mean, it was crazy. I don't know the square footage, but we lived in such a small space. So I guess that would be my answer, that it was kind of thrust upon me. And I did notice just things wouldn't fit. And every place, including where we live now in London, this was my first closet that I've had in my bedroom, which I nearly like fell over. I was like, we have to take this place. It has a closet in the master bed. And I mean, it really does humble you, because you're like, you go from these, growing up in a house where there was storage, there's an attic, there's a garage, there's a junk room, there's a playroom, and we have 3 kids in a flat here. And so, we'd never had, none of the places we didn't have closets. Remember, we had those 2 closets on the entryway, and we were like, yay. So you just start from there, and you're like, okay, this is what I have, and this is what I'm willing to do to live here, because that to me is more important than whatever else. And so I'm going to make it work in this place. And I guess over time, then it was like, how do I maximize not having a closet?
Right. Well, I mean, basically, I feel like your life, having always lived in these major cities, has placed boundaries on what you can own, whether you like it or not. And it's really forced you to get intentional. Those are the 2 things I'm hearing, is that you had boundaries already set in place. And so you have been able to find joy within those boundaries and priorities within those boundaries. And you've learned, because finances are real, right? And boundaries are real, whether they're financial or physical. And they force you to say what's intentional. And for you, and both of us, when we lived in New York, we were like, okay, I'm going to be intentional about spending my money on X, Y, and Z, on the things that really matter, and kind of saying that the rest is something that we don't need in our lives. And I think that's decluttering. That is decluttering what we do with our finances, with our time, and with our spaces. So it's perfect. And I do want you to touch on a little bit why you moved from New York City to Hong Kong to London, right? Is that the 3? And that's mostly because of Matt's
Job.
work? Is that okay? But what did you do in Hong Kong? Tell everyone what you did.
I was a Disney princess.
She was a Disney princess. And how was that? What was that like when you got to meet people and work with people at Disney from all over the world? I know this isn't necessarily about simplifying, but I just think that part of your life is so cool.
Oh, thank you. And I was even thinking what you just said about, I was like, oh, I did not budget well in New York, but I learned my lesson. And again, those boundaries, because I wasn't a boundary person. And now it's like, that's the gift. It's like, life throws you lemons, you make lemonade. But New York, so then going to Hong Kong, I was like, let's do it. And my reasons were like food, travel, we don't have kids yet, let's do it. And it was in Hell's Kitchen, and Matt asked me about it, and I was like, let's go. I'd never been there before. And the funny thing was, I'd stopped performing. I wasn't like auditioning anymore. I was working in an ad agency. But I remember I wanted to sing again, and I'd done like a small off-Broadway kids thing, and I really felt that pull, like, oh, there must be something for me. And then I remember looking up on Google, like, what performing jobs are there in Hong Kong? And there was an audition for Disney in New York. So I went to the audition in New York City, and it was just such a provision, such a blessing. And I remember, like, one of the reasons actually that I stopped performing and auditioning was because I really didn't like the one-upping and the having to get there early and having to really be competitive, because it just wasn't by nature. But I remember going and just being like, I am already moving to Hong Kong because of my husband's job. And I felt like it was like kind of one-upping, but that was what was happening. And I felt like, oh gosh, everyone in this audition room is going to hate me because I'm telling them, like, I'm moving, pick me. But it definitely helped because we're already moving. And then the rest was history. I got the job, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a wonderful season. I mean, it was hard work because it was outside. I started in a different role in an outdoor show, and in literally 100 like % humidity in a tropical place, wearing a very heavy costume. I got a lot of like heat related injuries. So like Florida, but even more humid, and hot. And I fell in love with the Chinese culture. I fell in love with Southeast Asia, and I particularly loved meeting my Filipino kuyas and ates, who are like brothers and sisters to me. They were the most humble, kind, generous people who would worked there since the park's inception, like over 12 years. And then a lot of like the expat packages were like the Westerners coming over and doing the various roles. So just seeing that and observing so much from the guests and the company and my colleagues was just like invaluable. Yeah, really great.
I'm curious. Obviously, the only similarity in the two countries I'm about to relate is population. So don't get me wrong on comparing two things that definitely can't be compared. But I spent a lot of time in India when I was a teenager. And obviously, these are both very highly populated places, which also speaks to how much space people have and how much people can own. It has to be a lot less because there's not room, right? When everybody has to live in a high rise, or everyone in India has to live in these tiny little ramshackles. And so I found that these people were so happy. I remember that being probably my biggest takeaway from India. We worked in AIDS homes and leper colonies and some really intense things. And my takeaway was like, golly day, these people are happy. And that's not to say that obviously they need more and all of that, but there's lessons to be learned there. And so I'm curious, you had mentioned that Hong Kong was where you really started to notice how much you needed to be intentional with your living space. What was that like for you? How did you declutter? And what did that do for your own happiness?
Wow. That's a great question. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind was how we got our furniture into our flat, and it was basically like an eBay equivalent app, and we literally got a like hire van and fit this giant L-shaped couch into this van. And I'm talking a steep mountain. We're going down the mountain because we came to realize that like any society, there's very much a class system society in Hong Kong, and the more wealthy people live up the mountain because they can afford the space and there's bigger homes and beautiful outlooking, whereas it's not that simple, but that's where we got this nice couch used. And anyway, trying to fit that into our apartment was hilarious, but I'll just never forget riding down the mountain with this, and I'm sandwiched in the back with the couch. So that was definitely like eye-opening, and just getting everything like secondhand used from charity shops. They call them charity shops here, but I can't even, like, I'm so far into British lingo now that what would you call it? A secondhand store. And then
Thrift store.
Thrift store. Yes. Well, charity shops here, I guess, because they're sponsored by like the British Red Cross or different organizations. And I guess another thing that really sticks out to me was sort of in relation to that like expat versus local dynamic and infrastructure issue within Hong Kong. That's neither necessarily good nor bad, but I made a lot of friends that were locals, so that means they were born and raised in Hong Kong, or even one of my best friends was born and raised in China, and then she came to Hong Kong later. And she brought me home to her parents' house, and also to her like aunts and uncles' houses. And so I took a break from Disney and I worked for our church with the youth because I was already like volunteering with them a lot, and it was around the corner from my house, and that was a wonderful season. But a lot of the youth too, some of them were like from expat families and some of them from local families, so very diverse. And there's that same, like you're talking about with New York or Hong Kong, there's that same like disparity of wealth. You've got like the ultra rich and the ultra poor, really. And that fascinated me. But so I visited some of those homes too as like a youth worker, and I visited the like international schools. I visited the local schools, and it was just astounding to see. But when I went with my friend to her home and her aunt and uncle's home, I was literally, Shannon, I will never forget it my whole life. It was just so humbling to see. Taking our apartment, which was literally one room and two tiny little rooms, and we joked in our kitchen you could cook, use the bathroom, and shower like at the same time. That was where we lived, and that was considered like really nice, very expensive, in a really nice part of town with us working two jobs and making good money. So I went to the other parts, like new territories or other neighborhoods where they were living, and I visited, and they hosted me. They just had, again, the warmest hospitality, the kindest nature, and also in Chinese culture, it's very village mentality versus individualistic mentality. And that touched me, with their hospitality in regards to food. So they would share the food. And I kid you not, there was a family on one of the visits where there was the grandparents, the parents, and the grandchildren in a room, literally a room the size of the one that I'm in, our front room. And that's including the kitchen, including the bathroom. And they just had bunks. And they had me into their house to feed me, and we're sitting on these little like plastic stools, and they're so happy. And there a lot of the like social housing there too is sort of like has like a railing, and it's very like cell like. And or seeing where my friend grew up and her in her bedroom. I mean, it was like her and her brother together in like a thin, like you could fit a twin bed and that's it. I mean, it was just so eye-opening and so humbling. So that touched me a lot. And I think I took that with me, and it always humbled me. Like, I can't complain at all with where I'm living and the abundance that I have in our home, even though we had like a 1-bedroom flat, and how to spread that generosity. And we would always have people over and invite people in. And we do feel we have the gift of hospitality, but we would just pack people in. I mean, then I guess from that, I tried to, every year in Hong Kong, we did a Friendsgiving. So we'd have like the other expats, or my mom would be visiting. Literally, we joked again, we cooked a Thanksgiving meal in our like tiny, and it was smaller than our kitchen in the Washington Heights apartment. So like half that, maybe even less than half. We cooked an entire Thanksgiving meal, and we just made it work. And we're all sandwiched in there, but everyone just, no one was like more or less happy than anyone else that I know. And you really just made it work. Yeah.
And it speaks to the fact that you don't need a lot of stuff or space to make your house feel A, like a home, B, like happy. I mean, I think so many of us in Western culture are like, I need more square footage because I want to have people over, or our kids need more space to be happy, and they need all of this stuff. And I want it to be beautifully decorated. And I want. And what you've learned, and what I got a taste of a little bit in India, not nearly as immersed as you though, but was that like what makes a house feel like a home are the people, it's the energy, it's the love. And that has nothing to do with stuff, right? Like that just really doesn't. It's not about putting on your cutest dress because you have people coming over for dinner. Like has nothing to do with the hospitality and love that's behind welcoming people into our home, and behind living in a home that we can enjoy and that we can feel happy in. So I think that perspective is such a cool experience you had, and I appreciate you sharing it, because in Western culture, most of us never get exposed to the lack of space and the lack of stuff that other places have. And it's not a matter of feeling guilty and being like, oh, I just should be grateful. I mean, we should, but it's also just a lesson in like, hey, like we don't need all of this. It's just bogging us down. Maybe there's a reason that they're all so darn happy and they're also good at being hospitable, because they're not managing this giant property and all of this stuff in the house. They're just there for a good time.
Yeah, it really like showed me to how just the level of privilege. And we throw that word out a lot now in modern society, but really, it was just like the level of privilege growing up as an American or as a Westerner. Even my husband in Germany, a German village in a big house, and we also know we can go back to that at any point that we'd like because of our citizenship. And there's also a large Filipino population in Hong Kong, and that's a whole other thing. But I think it made me a little bit also more critical. It was like, oh, I love my country and I've been away now, but it made me a little bit more critical too of like, that privilege, or more aware maybe. And just like, oh my gosh, thinking that's so extra. Like, I don't know, the things I grew up with, like that aren't bad in and of themselves, but we always had like my mom, bless her, and I want to be the same of a lot of things that I do to create memories for my kids. But we would have like, for example, it was like, starting the year, it was snowflakes, all around the house. Then it was like Valentine's season. Then it was St. Patrick's Day season. Then it was, pumpkins. Everything had like a theme, and the house needed to be kind of wrapped around that. And I mean, obviously as well now with the earth, loving the earth. I mean, these are huge things for our time and for our generations, for our kids' generations, of like reusing versus not, and the level of trash that we consume. And I'm not even like that, well versed in it, but I guess it's just all to say that there was such a level of extraness that since I've been away, because those cultures as well don't celebrate some of those like really Western holidays even. So it would be like very common even on July 4th or what have you, where nobody's celebrating it. And it would always feel weird to me because I'm like, this is a big day and I miss it and I'm so proud of it and I want to celebrate it. And you find your way to, but it's not being celebrated where you live. So therefore there's not a big thing, and there's not the decorations, and there's not the stuff in the grocery stores. There's not stuff in shops displayed in that way. Of course, they have their own holidays, but it really
cuts back on the consumerism, because if you think about it, every holiday comes with like consumerism, and it's more and more. I mean, you have kids. I'm like, do we need candy for Easter? By the time the kids eat their Easter candy, it's time to get 4th of July parade candy, and then it's Halloween candy, and then it's stocking candy. And I'm like, dear God.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Yeah. And and what I'm hearing too, though, is that what you appreciated growing up from your mom was the feelings you got of how exciting life is, right? Life is exciting, and that can be part of holidays. And my kids love holidays, right? They've been counting down to Halloween since 4th of July. And I don't think that is bad. But when we turn it into something that's maybe more of a consumerist mindset, that's when things become overwhelming. But we can create these memories for our kids without the stuff. Yeah, more simply. And so let's kind of dive into that for the sake of time too. So you now have 3 beautiful little girls, and you live in London in a flat with all 3 of them. And something I know that you're really, really good at is what you've touched on when it comes to toys and clothes and living your life a little more secondhand. Can you tell me where that came from and how you apply it to raising kids?
Yeah, it's crazy how passionate I've become about it, that I've started to use, like, even change my vocabulary, that it is a core value. And I feel like for you too, it is. I mean, you've started this whole endeavor. It's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I think it's so great because it's so applicable to everything. And I think before being a mom, it wasn't so much. Maybe it was like the phase 2 of 3 times of nesting, when you like want to nest. That came on me so strongly each time, like needing to just. And I got so into Marie Kondo and folding it and making it look nice, even if it gets destroyed a day later. But yeah, it just sort of became a core value. And again, we didn't have closets, and having them so close in age, I have to like recycle things through. And again, I think it just kind of dawned on me one day. I can't say that it was a one-time thing, but it was just like, oh, I can get something really cheap at a charity shop that's really nice, just like in New York, the Upper West Side. They were always donating like the nicest stuff for cheap. And it's like kind of like, I always remember my mom loved a deal. I love a deal. And I'm not even the best with money really, but kind of knowing you're getting a deal, knowing it's like giving back. There's also a big culture here around moms rallying and like WhatsApps and groups saying, hey, I've got this. Do you have that? Because we literally like we live very close together on top of each other. Literally just today, I gave some stuff to my friend who's having a baby, and then she'll probably give it back to me. And then I've given it to my other birth group mom, and she gives it back. And it's just nice because, they grow out of it so quickly. And again, you just don't have the space. We have one area of storage. And I think I just started to feel really overwhelmed, especially in COVID when we were home so much, that the stuff was just piling up. And I had 2 very, very close in age. So when my first was 6 months old, I got pregnant with my second. So I kind of needed the same bits, but then they grow out of it, but you need to keep it. And I realized that there was this joy when I could give it away and that someone else could benefit from it. It just was like win, win, win. And I found too that when sometimes people would give me things, relatives or people, it would start to overwhelm me. And then I would get upset because I'm needing to tidy, to control something. And then the kids are upset because they've gotten something new. Like we get a lot of packages because we live away from family. And so I've learned the very hard way, to not open it. Because when we open it, they want it and they're excited. They want to wear it right away. And then they're upset because it doesn't fit right or it's itchy. And so again, it's like these little tiny things that should bring joy, but then they bring stress. And I think it really hit me. I don't want my girls, especially being little girls and being raising women, I didn't want them to start to see things uh, as more important than experiences or people. And again, we're in a city, so they have a lot of experiences, and we would spend more money on that. And so that boundary again. But I really, and we're Matt and I are also really passionate about not making them, not putting a huge focus on what they wear, but just what they want to wear. Because I know I think in our generation too, just growing up like very girly and looking pretty and not getting it messed up. And I mean, there's so much you could say about it, but I guess it was just these core values of like, I didn't think about that much before kids, but it's just how you want to raise them, and like that people are more important than things, and generosity is more important than getting. And we kind of have a rule of if we get something, we need to give something away. So I just, the more I did it, the more I was like into it, like, oh, this is really bringing me life right now. So I joke they know me at the charity shop. Literally, I was there today and I thought of you. I was like donating more stuff.
Yes, it's so life-giving. And like you
I
said,
just love it.
there are so many benefits. There's benefits in terms of what values we're passing down to our children. There's benefits in terms of reducing our stress when we're at home. There's benefits in creating community. I mean, there's benefit after benefit. There's pride in knowing you're not letting your stuff control you, that you're taking control of an aspect of your life. With as moms, I feel like we don't have a whole lot of control sometimes. So I personally am like, this is great.
Time, because then you're spending time just, I found myself, I get frustrated with them because I'm spending time just like a little like ferret, like, and I'm not being present because I'm wasting time on stuff. Because time
on stuff, managing stuff. Oh my gosh, yeah.
And you have 3 kids, it's just,
I do.
Even with little, the stuff's always everywhere. The toys are always like, even with a little, like we don't have very many toys either. So yeah, if they're not using it, it's gone. Or with clothes,
and something yes, and what you've done so well as you've really made a passion for, or developed this passion for secondhand stuff too, is recognizing that we don't have to hold on to it in case we need it again. The what if is not realistic in your life, because if you did what if with 3 kids, you're like, I will just not be able to move in my house. There'll be so much stuff. And so for you to say, hey, I have a 6-month-old and we're pregnant again. And so, and then you guys had one not so long after your second as well, but saying, I don't need to keep every piece of baby gear. What I can do is give it to someone who needs it right now. And I know I can get it back. That community, it's a cycle. Like, I think we think when we get rid of something, it is forever. But realistically, if you look at your community and you focus on community, you can often just like borrow it out to make room in your house while it's not being used. And when you need it again, their baby's not going to be the same age and you take it right on back. Like, if we live in this community mindset where we're sharing our things, we then all have so much more space that makes sense for us in the exact moment we're in. I mean, Erin and I do that now with even our neighbors across the street. Hey, can we borrow this? I don't know, some tool. Erin always borrows from our neighbor, Eric. And Eric has come over and borrowed this. And therefore, we are not both storing the same thing right across the street from each other, right? We often just think of our homes as like these isolated places that we have to have everything we need. But realistically, when you come to this community mindset, we don't have to store everything we need, because we can borrow it and we can lend, and then it fosters that community as well. And it's a snowball. And then more people and they have more stuff and you can lend more stuff. And suddenly your homes are really a reflection of the community that you live in. And I think that is beautiful in itself.
Because there's always someone who needs something too, like in a church group or a mom's group, and I think too, being in a big city, well, and anywhere really, but there's those needs. People have needs. We had a big influx of Ukrainian refugees last year. And it was like, oh, let's rally, and there's even the infrastructure here, like a lot of the public housing is dispersed throughout the city. So there are just needs that are very visible. And so it's like, who can benefit from this when we have so much abundance?
And you're not using it currently. I mean, it's so true.
It's a win-win. And you're just like, yes.
Yes, exactly. And to know that even if you don't get that exact one back, if you're giving it to a refugee and you're never going to see them again, like if you still need that in the future, you can probably find it at a thrift store and it's going to be okay. Okay, for the sake of time. Hi. Oh, we've got a little kiddo joining us. Well, Britt, I'm going to let you go. I would love to hear, though, even with your sweetie here on the podcast, what's one thing bringing you joy right now, Britt?
Oh my gosh. Is it silly to say our air fryer?
No.
We never had one, so we did get something new. And that's what we still buy on Amazon. We still like buy lots of things like any family, but we are like sold. I mean, it's made like easier, quicker. Everything is great. Just 3 kids. Yeah. Here's Naomi. This is my friend Shannon on podcast.
Oh, I love it. No, hey, listen, I love a good practical air fryer moment. So, well, thank you so much.
Especially maybe WhatsApp. I live on WhatsApp. I don't know if it's as big in the States, but it's just like groups and other moms and communication. And if I need to give something, I just put it on WhatsApp. So probably those 2 things.
Those are like really practical and fantastic answers. And I love that.
Yeah.
I love you so much. Thanks for being on the pod, girl. And we'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye. Say cheerio from London.
Cheerio. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face, so thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at Paring Down Podcast, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.